Hey, hello everyone. Welcome to the comic-based live stream. I'm your host, Pete Bickford. I am the creator of ComicBase. Did a few other things in my time, but we'll be talking about all things comics, comic-basey, and otherwise interesting to folks today. Anyway, another amazing launch to the best produced show on the internet. We do have our mod in the house with us today, Greg Hecht. So hopefully, if we get spammed later on, that will be kept to a bare minimum. And for the next hour or so, I want to talk about the upcoming release of our big quarterly update, our Q4 one, which I can't give you some of the final data on right now, but we've been awfully busy, as you will see, doing things over the last quarter. And I want to go into some of the details of the things we've been up to. Also, if we get a chance, I also want to talk about some of the action around Atomic Avenue, some of the back-end server things that, whether you know or not, actually do affect your life, and if time serves, I want to also see if I can touch on just a quick review of a 1940s men's comic or men's magazine, and just I feel like what it says about just what a very different world we live in today, because I find it very interesting. Anyway, hey everyone, welcome here. And by the way, if you have questions for the show, please ask in the chat and put them to @ComicBase TV, because that helps them stand out and it makes it a little easier to parse out as things go scrolling by. Want to say hey first off to Andre, welcome aboard. And man, Andre, again, start of the hour. I'm going to have to be awarding you something like 110,000 correction points later on today after we get done digesting all of your corrections for this week's update. The staff over in California is busy putting that up as we speak. It might be over by the time, might be posted by the time we're done with the show, or it might not, but I'll be certainly crediting you as soon as that is done. Robbie, great to see you. Tim, hey everyone, and also I hope everyone had a good Halloween, and the weather's treating you well. We are having an unseasonably warm day for November out here in Franklin, Tennessee. I'm actually almost having to switch the AC back on because it's just hot as hell in my office, but hope you're all doing well. Oh yes, Orosis is outrageously hot in Minneapolis. 75 degrees. That is one for the ages out there. Beautiful 67 out here for Greg Hecht. Xanadu Comics, great to see you out there. And let's see what else we got going on here. Oh yeah, and Andrew says, "Way to go, got it on the first try." And let's. All right, and Ed Billiot, gonna see you, and Ed Brito as well. Hey everyone. Okay, so let's get into a little bit. So this is normally the start of the show where we talk, comic-based news, and it's going to be both a summary of the things we've been doing in the last week, but also, what we've been doing all the way back. So starting kind of in reverse order of what we were doing just in the last week. You guys might have noticed I had just gotten done rolling in some changes to scrolling right when we did our last live stream to try to make it more responsive. The trick we had when we did ComicBase 2023, we went 64-bit, which freed up a lot of memory. It allowed us to manage truly epic-sized lists. In other words, you could load up every single issue of the Times of London or New York Times or anything like that into one ginormous list and actually deal with it pretty normally without having to page at all. The problem, well, when we did that, we also made it so that it would sync the pictures. Basically, whenever they came into view, you'd sit there with the picture in hand. You didn't have to wait forever for the little timer to start at the top and count to the bottom. And if you were doing that for the New York Times, you'd be waiting a good long time before it finally caught up with you if you were doing work at the end of the list. One trick we found, though, on the other hand, with everything we did, is we were really throwing the horsepower of your computer at making that happen. But scrolling itself became a little unresponsive, because every time you would scroll the content of that thing, it would have to update, not whatever it had cached ahead of time, but it'd have to in real time while you're watching scroll those 18 lines or however many lines were showing on your screen at the time. And particularly if you had an older computer, or if you had a computer without a solid state disk drive, that would come off as really kind of thunky. So we tried some stuff to free it up, and it looked like we were doing pretty good with it last week. And then we found out, to our great dismay, that it turns out that on really fast fast computers, it wound up having the opposite effect. It actually made things go really badly for fast computer owners. Well, it made them much better for slow computers owners. So we put on our thinking cap, revisited the entire way we were going about the whole thing. And we came up with this very strange hybrid approach that actually seems like it works very, very well. I won't even try to describe the evil machinations that are involved with it all, but it seems like we've now gotten to the point where, whether on fast computers or slow computers, we get the ability to show you very large lists that's very responsive as you scroll, and within a second or two tops, as you scroll down to any random place in the list, you should be seeing all the pictures catching up with you, and the whole thing should feel very fluid. So try it out. It's build 2003 is the build as of press time, and you can get that if you go under My Account, Registrations, and just download the software again, or if you can get that automatically if you have your ComicBase set to automatically check for preliminary updates. But I think you're going to, the people who've tried it on both ends of the spectrum with computers have been pretty happy with what they've seen. That's probably the most epic thing that's happened. Other things that are probably, though, still significant. You might have noticed in the last release of ComicBase, we snuck in a number of kind of maintenance fields into the grid. They're not normally visible by default, but you can go into the items to view under setup, and then items to view, and turn on columns to view, and turn them on. So you're looking at the grid. And there are things that do things like tracking the last time a value was changed in the grid, or last time a picture was updated, and so forth. We had done some of the stuff. It was primarily only tracking things that were done by the update itself, but we've now fully integrated the different ways that you can change items yourself into those fields, so that now if you're starting with build 2003, anytime you drag and drop a picture in, you should, if you have those fields shown to be visible, you should see them instantly update, and they should track your changes in real time. Adding by barcodes, downloading sales off Atomic Avenue, you name it, all the different ways there are of changing data. You should see all those fields start catching up with you. And this actually makes it possible to do some fairly interesting things with your own finds. So you could say, after a while, you could say, show me all the things that I have changed the quantity of in my collection in the last 2 weeks, or show me all the things where the value's changed, and using advanced find, and the value's gone up in the last 3 weeks. So we set the groundwork for that. We finally implemented out all the little nooks and crannies of it this week. So that one is new, and I think you'll see it have a bigger effect as we go along. Other things that are interesting. We did some changes to Sidekick, in particular with the way that it deals with performing all tasks or updating all databases. If you're managing multiple databases, it should do it solved a couple of kind of transient issues with that, but should do a better job of that, particularly with the controlling the logs. We talked about this last time. We added a new behavior, which is control page up. It will take you, even in a very long title, if you're working at the bottom, it'll take you instantly to the very top of that grid, and control page down takes you all the way to the bottom. So if you are ever going into a long title, like say Batman, and you just want to bounce down to the latest issues, control page down, boom, you're there. But then another thing, and we added this behavior in a couple of builds ago, but we made it a little slicker, is you can also, never forget, use the F3 command to instantly jump to a particular issue in the list. So if I'm looking at Batman and I want to jump instantly to issue 999 or something, just F3, type 999, bounce, it'll go straight there. And it now also accounts for variance as well. All right, so let me also, as I'm doing this, let me switch over to a computer, because at this point I can probably be talking about stuff while showing it on screen, and that might make a little bit more sense. So, for instance, let me bounce my mouse over so I'm controlling that computer. Okay, so for instance, this is Action Comics, and just to show the scrolling behavior, I'm just going to go and randomly go to any particular place on this list. You'll see it keeps right up with me as I go. There's just that little half second when you see lists, in the middle, as the pictures draw. But I think if you try this, you'll find the whole thing it's just much more pleasant. Okay, other things that are new and fun. So for instance, here I'm going to hit control page up. Actually, if I get to the right thing. All right. Okay, so control page up takes me to the top. Control page down takes me all the way to the bottom instantly. Just a nice convenient feature. And then talking about F3, which is the jump to. If you go to an item, so let's go to something like, we know there are about 1,000 variants of issue number 1,000. So I could type in like 1000/A to go to variant A, or I could type 1000 and go to just, whatever the first issue of 1000 was. Let's go 1000/C. Boom, there we are. And so that's actually a very convenient way of moving around these larger lists rather than just scrolling all day long. All right. Other things that are cool. We talked about the scrolling already. And let's see. There's different searches that we've done some tooling on to bring up their speed. Searching for years published and so forth is nicer. We found to my great embarrassment, and I always love the things that they have been broken, but they've been broken very subtly for a very, very long time, and no one ever quite figured out for sure that there was a problem. And so one of these things popped up after years of being in the program. No one knew until one intrepid user got very, very curious as to why, when he's printing title dividers, in his particular collection, this one title would always get clipped off on the smallish labels that he was using. And so what we're talking about here is if I go into print and I go down and I say I want to go to title dividers. Let's go here. Divider labels. Okay, so, and let's go for, I'm just going to pick, let's just pick a random bunch of them right now. Because I'm both horrified that this existed and actually kind of pleased that it was finally found. So I'm just gonna grab a bunch over here, and let's go ahead and hit OK. All right, and I'm gonna say that I'm gonna print these on Avery 5160 labels, which is about the smallest label you could ever conceive of printing these on. This is a sheet-fed label. You'd load into like a laser writer or an inkjet. All right, so what these are. And I'm just going to print one label per side right now. And let's see here. Okay, and so what this will typically do, I guess I had both labels chosen, is it will typically go and print you the title divider, which, let's see if I can find an example of this. And I've just put together, I wondered, why was this title divider sitting on my desk earlier this morning? And the answer is not that I needed to pull the divider off. It's just that somehow we'd managed to shatter it in half. But anyway, so this would be the title divider for X-Force 3rd Series. It's so faded away you can barely see it, and now I'm finally going to throw that away. But what these are really, really good for is being able to label all these little title dividers as you go to put your collection together. And what this user had figured out is that even though we try to auto-size the labels to fit, on whatever size they've got to draw in, there were just a couple that would always wind up getting just a little bit clipped for them, especially when we do this little trick. And let me see if I can get down to it. Let's see here. I got to go to next page here. Yeah, no, I don't. Yeah, so there's a little trick, especially with volume 1, 2, 3, 4, etc., that would try to put that on a separate line, and it would clip it just ever so slightly. What we eventually determined at the end is on his particular report, we're trying to figure out what would fit on a given label. We just swapped the height, the height and the width of the label dimensions, and so it same actual area to lay it out in, but because lines actually matter when you're setting type on that particular label, it just was clipping for the odd sort of thing. It's been in the program that way probably forever, and that finally got fixed this last time out. I'm very, very glad for that, and thank you to the user who managed to find the problem. But anyway, that's like I say, every couple of years we'll find something like that it's been wrong forever, but it's been wrong in such a subtle way we never knew it. And it takes someone to just kind of hold our feet to the fire and say, yeah, this isn't quite right, and just really make us drill in on it. But thank you very much for making that happen. All right, other things that are better. Sidekick, our favorite program for managing, just all the unfun things in the program, that we have to do with comics and ComicBase. So let's go ahead and pop him up, because I think I just reinstalled. He wouldn't have been running. So Sidekick normally runs down here in the notification area. Or if you don't see him, go ahead and click the up arrow icon over here to show your icons, and look for the little superhero looking guy right over here. So Sidekick, in addition to making it better with dealing with multiple databases, but his job is he makes it so that you can automatically do all the unfun things, updating the database, backing it up to the cloud, posting your items for sale on Atomic Avenue, keeping your inventory in sync, all that stuff. So he just kind of runs down the background. You don't need to interact with him typically, and he just kind of does his thing. Well, we added some features to him in this last build. If you go into the settings, actually, this was in the week before last, but this is worth noting on this whole thing. So if you go over to settings, and then I'm going to zoom in on Save to Cloud, and you'll see we've got every time when you back up your database, you can do some new things here, which are actually pretty darn cool. So if you've got a Pro or an Archive edition, you can have it automatically create reports for you so that they're always ready on the mobile app when you want to look for them. But now you also can have it kind of prune your wanted list so that it automatically, if you've ever marked something as wanted in your program, and you actually get it in stock, it can actually go in there and say, hey, do you still want it? Because I noticed they actually have some, but it can go ahead. It'll actually uncheck wanted for owned items if you check that off. You also can have it sync up your wanted list of books with Atomic Avenue's wanted list or wish list, I think is what they call it. And so that way, if there's something you have in ComicBase that's marked as I'm looking for it, it gets automatically added to the wish list on Atomic Avenue. And whenever anyone posts one of those for sale in whatever grade you're looking for, it'll automatically send you email and let you know that you can buy it there. And then another thing that's kind of cool here is you also can remove items from the Atomic Avenue wish list that aren't marked as wanted. So if you had things that were in Atomic Avenue, like let's say at one point you'd marked a bunch of stuff, but then in your private collecting you'd gotten it, between the unchecking the things you've gotten and removing the items on the Atomic Avenue wish list, you can make it so you stop getting emails about all those things that you've already got, and that is a useful thing. All right. So all things in considered, between that and some of the improvements they've done on Atomic Avenue in general, the wish list and wanted list are really much more useful than they were. It used to be on Atomic Avenue in particular, you'd get a lot of items. If there was like a guy in England who had a lot of books I wanted, but he didn't ship to America, and it would drive me crazy because I'd keep on getting wish list hits on him, even though he couldn't actually ship to me. They finally fixed that. They did a few other things on Atomic Avenue that really make the whole thing much more pleasant. So give that a shot if you haven't used it in a while. All right, what else is going on? Let me see. Oh, yeah, speaking of Atomic Avenue, I'm looking at my notes here. Go back to this computer. We did a bunch of dredging. We talked about this last week on Atomic Avenue right after we shipped. So we made it so that when you're checking for sales and purchases, originally we had added a brand new API for which is geek speak for applications programming interface, but basically a way for programs to talk to other programs. So ComicBase had a way of, had added a new set of connections so that they could talk directly to Atomic Avenue servers and pull in information about your sales, and that's what drives the new sales reports in ComicBase 2023. Well, one of the things that, and someone's trying to reach me on Dropbox, and he's gonna have to wait. Anyway, one of the things that was a challenge about that is you could only bring in sales data about the things that were new since they built that path between the two things, which was great because you could start getting sales reports and stuff like that in the program starting from about September 3rd on. Which is when we were getting ready to ship ComicBase 2023. But what we did afterwards is we went and did a deep dredge of the Atomic Avenue sales records and put them into a format, converting over stuff. Those things have changed a lot over the many years, but we dredged as much data as we could possibly get, mapped it to your user account as well as could possibly be done. There are still some strays out there in the world, but made so that it's now possible to know when you check for sales and purchases, pull down all your sales history off Atomic Avenue all the way back to the genesis of that system. Now, one thing I do want to warn people about, and a couple people pinged me after this one, and please also, if you're viewing this now and this is happening to you, please do reach out. If you get the message saying there are some older sales records that we'd like to pull down, do you want to incorporate them now? You say yes. it get you know, and it but then it gives you the same message the next time you're using the program. What that means is that they're attached to a database which we just don't know its ID of, because the database ID wasn't always stored with the sales records, and we don't know which database you're checking from. So we know them, we know that they're from you, but we don't know which database they came from, which is a problem if you were using more than one collection. So some people, sell on consignment or do things like that. We don't want to remove sales records, even if they're on your account. We don't want to remove them from just whatever database you happen to be using. But what you can do, if that applies to you, is reach out to us, and you can reach out to me, pbickford at human-computing.com. Let me go ahead and put my name right up on the browser if I can find. Thought I had it up here a second ago. There we are. Let's see. Go to the run of the show, and that should do it right there. Okay, so pbickford at human-computing.com. Reach out to me if you're getting that message, and tell me what database ID you'd like them assigned to, and we can do some mojo on the back end so that those things get automatically pulled off and debited against whatever, they'll be reflected in the sales report of whatever database you chose to put them under. And by the way, for for knowing what database to, look at, the way you find that is we don't need to know its name. We need to know its ID number. And you find the ID number. This is slightly complicated. Actually, let me pull down the graphic here so that hope everyone's got my email down now. All right, but if you don't, we can always put it up later. But come up under here, go to the file menu, go to collection statistics. And you've probably seen this one before. It's a really good way of just finding out, in general, what, you've got in your database, what the whole thing's worth, and so forth. Now, come on over here to this little icon on the right. That's the database info icon right there. And you'll get a message, all the sort of nitty-gritty about your particular database, but also will give you this very, very important and preposterous number, which is it's called a global unique identifier. But what it is, it's one of these numbers that supposedly is unique in all of time and space. But but it is the way that our backend servers know what database you're talking about. If you tell us that you would like all, copy and paste that. But if you tell us that you would like to put all your existing sales records that haven't been processed yet, all the ones that didn't have a database tied to them, give us the ID number of the database you'd like it to be processed against. We can make the changes on the back end. You'll get that message one more time, saying you've got old sales records. Do you want to process them? You say yes, and then they'll all get incorporated, and you'll never see that message again. So if that has happened to you, please reach out. I've done it for a few folks already, but I know there's a couple more out there. So reach out, and we'll take care of that for you. All right. What else has been going on? Let's see. We've done some, improvements to the sales reports themselves. We fixed some totaling issues. We rolled the speed improvements that we put into the main grid into the select by items grid, which comes up, for instance, if you are looking up issues to add for a report, or if there's a barcode that you don't know for a given item when you're adding by barcode, you go into this thing called the select items grid. Let me go ahead and pull that up. And if I say look up, this menu right here, so let's go to Batman, some preposterously long title like that. So all our speed improvements now apply here as well, and so this worked out very well. And I think that's most of the major stuff of the program itself. Now there's some other things. Let me come back off the main menu here. Okay, there's some other things that are not really ComicBase changes, but they affect your life in good, hopefully good ways. So we mentioned some of the changes to Atomic Avenue that have happened. One of the big ones that happened just this last week is if you were using what's called the old store style on Atomic Avenue, which is when you go to a seller's store, there's kind of a new format where it's kind of like you're looking through pages of an album where you're seeing big pictures of all the material as they go. And there's kind of an older one where you're kind of just browsing by title. There are a number of people who, for whatever reason, prefer the browse by title view. That one can now sell books and magazines. That was a problem beforehand, so that got resolved. So, and thank you to our mod, Greg Hecht, for pointing that one out, because as soon as we fixed on where the disconnect was on what we were seeing versus what the users were seeing, it was pretty easy problem to fix. Once again, it's like, don't worry that you're ever going to offend us if you hold our feet to the fire and something isn't working right. A lot of times it's just you might have something that's just unique enough to what your situation is, that we just need to figure out what exactly is going on. Is it related to a problem on a database or something that's really specific to you, or have you just tumbled onto a very specific way of working that isn't anything that's ever come through in general and been reported on? And never assume that just other people have already told us about it, because you never know. It's like I say, it's like that thing with the Avery 4160 labels, and I think it was Journey into Mystery second series or something. It's such a crazy little thing here that unless you really dive into it, you'd never know that something like that was wrong. All right. Other things, speaking of that, a weird situation on the servers. If you ever had trouble adding purchased items through the mobile app, where you go ahead and use the ComicBase free mobile app, and you say, I bought these things on the road, but then you go to add them back into your inventory in ComicBase and you get an error with it. Well, one way that you could get that error, it turns out, is if you had used an obsolete grade of GD, which used to stand for good back in the day. So once upon a time, gather around, children, I'll tell you a story of the olden times before everyone had standardized their name representations for grades. It was an open question 30 years ago when we got started as to whether the proper way to abbreviate the condition good, which is a sick joke in comics because good really means not very good at all. It means it's really pretty darn beat up. But there are kind of equal camps who would use G as a grading abbreviation for that, and other people who just said, no, GD, as in good, is the one that you want to use. The same thing would also go around with fine. F versus FN was another big one. But that one, for whatever reason, that one did not, go. I think because there was a fair. I don't think that one was ever quite as, contentious. But the good one in particular was broken down, and the way we solved it in early ComicBase is we just added them both, because you were going to be importing data from whatever spreadsheet or anything else you had. We didn't want to fight you on this one. We didn't want to make you change all your data beforehand. So it's whatever you'd used, they were both good. Yeah, they were both worth about 12% of a near mint copy of the whole thing. And whether it was G good or GD good, we didn't care. We just took it. All those things carried out through the entire genesis of Atomic Avenue, the mobile app, whatever else. And so in all those cases, good and GD have lived on forever. Until, I don't know, 5-6 years ago, we said enough of this already. The world has decided no one uses GD anymore. Let's get rid of the darn thing. We wrote a patch into ComicBase, which the first time you used it, took any good GD records you had, changed them to G, and remove the remove the good grade, the GD grade. That was fine. It worked just fine. But nobody ever synced that up with Atomic Avenue. And because no one ever synced that up with Atomic Avenue, there was still inventory out there that was listed as GD. Because I think there's actually pardon me the pun, but I think they probably had a good reason for not removing it right there, because you always want to preserve your backward capability, compatibility if you possibly can. But the problem came in is that because you was listed as a valid grade on Atomic Avenue, when the mobile app is asking, all right, you bought some things, what grade are they in? You had your choice of good to add them in. You could do the one at the top of the list, which most people did. And some people scrolled down to the bottom and found the unused good GD grade, chose that. And then when you try to sync that up to your new ComicBase, which no longer had that grade, you'd get a horrific error. So anyway, that got resolved. We're glad that's over. If that's ever happened to you, try it again now, and that should go away for you now. Anyway, but that's, again, some of the stuff is so weird you wouldn't believe it could ever happen, but yes, it does. Other things that are different with ComicBase and Atomic Avenue. Done a lot of effort. We were really kind of surprised when we looked at the mobile stats on this one, of how very, very many of the purchases and browsing were done mobile versus on desktops or larger like tablets and things like that. It's amazing how much mobile is taken over the world on those things. And so there's been kind of a scrub through both sites to try to make them more mobile friendly. On that one in particular, because there's such an infinite number of mobile devices out there in the world, please send your feedback to us. Let us know what things are we doing well, what things are still kind of clunky on mobile. We want to make this work as well as possible. We're using a technique called responsive design. So basically, whatever device you're using to browse it, it should kind of use the screen space as best as it possibly can. So you might notice, for instance, if you took your mobile phone and you are viewing a web page this way, and then you turn the mobile phone sideways, so the device effectively gets wider, you'll notice that actually will fill in more detailed information in a lot of cases, depending on what your device is. But when you turn it back the other way, some of the information gets streamlined out, so you've got something that you're not scrolling sideways and doing all sorts of crazy things trying to read, too much content on a mobile phone. But we do a lot of stuff like that right now. There are some other things that we didn't, let's face it, we could do better. But call us out on that. One thing that, for instance, you might notice that the websites change themes for the holidays, and somewhere in some of that theming, some of the menu items on very small format devices for ComicBase. It used to be very hard to steer the different menus on the comicbase.com site because the color schemes were kind of clashing when they got to the holiday themed ones. But yeah, those things, we think they're working great now, but if we're not, let us know, and we're happy to get them fixed. All right, what else is new? I think that has hit most of the highlights. Let me go check back at the chat and let's see what else we got going on. Gonna get my computer back under control of this one, and we'll take that. Okay. Let's see here. All right. Xanadu says, can a jump shift F3 be added to the sales terminal? Add button after the title has been pulled up. I'm not sure I understand the question. Can a jump shift F3 be added to the sales terminal after the title has been pulled up? Give me a little bit more on what you're looking for. I want to understand the use case on that and what you'd like to see happen. Maybe it's just not enough coffee yet, but I'm not quite getting what you're looking for. But write me, please, and tell me more, or if you can put it in the chat, I'll see if I can't get back to it. But yeah, I'm just trying to understand the case, and we'll take it from there. All right, so I think we're caught up on that one. So let me push through to the other things I want to talk about today. While we're talking about updates, so we've talked about all the features that we've been doing. And by the way, am I the only one who feels like that is crazy? It's only been 6 weeks since we launched this thing and we managed to do all this stuff. Well, it's not just that stuff that's going on. We also been very, very hard working on the content. There's another huge update coming out, like I say, right about as we're talking right now. I'll have the final stats on that, for this whole thing after that, including probably about 100,000 new listings that Andre just gave us. But as of the last 6 weeks, we have added over 7,588 new comics alone. Those are just the comics, and those are just the new ones. There have been 49,419 price and content updates in 6 weeks. We have just passed 875,000 pictures. We added over 16,000 new pictures in those 6 weeks. So we rounded up to our next. It's not quite another big round number, but it's a big number to be darn sure. And we are putting all this together. Right after this update, we'll be essentially going into the process where we take all the fastest computers we've got around here and we let them grind on our picture library and munch it down into different formats so we can update all the picture download disks, the quick add pictures, and so forth, so that whenever you install ComicBase new, you'll be getting all those pictures as part of your first install. And but on the other hand, if you've been keeping up with the pictures, if you have the archive edition and you've been keeping up from week to week, you don't need to do anything new. You've already got everything they've got. But if you're installing ComicBase on a new machine, it's always nice to have those things so that they're all ready to go for you the very first thing out of the can. But anyway, that'll be I will let folks know what the final numbers on those are when we make our official announcement about the Q4 update. But it's going to be fairly huge. Other things that are new, the overall content, we passed our big brag number quite a while ago. Once you pass 1 million comic books, saying you've added, another 8,000 comic books in 6 weeks. Well, I mean, sounds like a lot to me, but, and if I had 8,000 comic books land on my desk, I would panic. But yeah, I mean, the next sexy number after 1 million is probably 1.5 million or something. And I don't know what's going to happen to ever get, make that go on. We are getting close to rounding the corner on over 2 million newspaper listings, though, which is nuts. And it's certainly about 2 million things that aren't comic books that are already in the database. There's going to be freshly minted updates to the stock databases that come with ComicBase are going to be all part of the new install as well. All right, let's see. Okay, so Zazu says, sales terminal works great if you can scan the barcode. If there's no barcode, I use the add button to take you to title field and title. Okay, I get what you're saying. Okay, so what you're talking about, let's go back over the screen here, is you're looking for, I got to move my mouse over this one as well. So let's see. So if I pull up the sales, that's not the sales terminal. So if I pull up the sales terminal, which I don't use often enough to remember its command key, L, that would have made sense. Sure. So if you're beeping things out by barcode, they're going to just appear right here in the list. But if you have to look them up, then you're in the the item selection dialog we just looked at here. So let's say we go to Batman. And if I go there at that point, yeah, there's no quick jump down in this dialog to jump you down to a particular item. But that's an interesting thought of see if we could make that happen. I don't immediately know a good reason we couldn't make that happen. Let me see what's possible, and let me get back to you on that one. Sometimes these things wind up having a lot of very squirrely edges. Man, you would not believe the work that went into that that scrolling thing this last week. But yeah, let me look into that. That's a good idea. Thanks for the driving that suggestion. Okay, let's go back. All right. Greg says, I'm looking there. Okay, question. Any reason in particular why near mint valuations removed from Atomic Avenue's issue listings? I don't know. I think it was stylistic. It might have something to do with search. I know there's some very squirrely. There's a very squirrely field called search engine optimization, of having things appear in search results and not. And also, I remember that there was a lot of squirreliness around in order to show up on different shopping, the Google sites scrape shopping listings. In order to appear in some of those things as search results, they were looking for different prices. It might have something to do with that. Honestly, I'm not sure of the particulars on that one. As far as that goes, it might just be one of those things where, like, I'm not sure if it made sense to be listing book values on a live system as well, because in a way, one of the features of or one of the emphasis changes in Atomic Avenue lately has been towards, don't show it as if it's like a price resource guide, show it as if it's live stuff for sale that you can really buy, which is also where some of the pruning of the wish list came from. But as far as the specifics of that particular decision, I don't know. All right. Okay, let's see. And also, Gray wants to remind folks who tuned in from last week's live stream, we have a thread on the ComicBase message boards where folks can discuss the bundled items issue. Oh, yes, and please do. Just to briefly recap that discussion, what we were talking about is, what do you do with comic books that included other things, everything from tattoos, temporary tattoos, to in the most extreme cases, you had issues of Judge Dredd magazine that included a whole other graphic novel with the comic. And so if these things could ever be separated, certainly, and in case of like the graphic novels, they clearly were separated. I wound up buying a few of them in a shop one day, not knowing they had ever had any other provenance other than as the graphic novel I'm seeing for sale. If you need to be able to treat the thing, the separate items need to be able to be cataloged separately if they're something that we catalog at all. So if it's a issue of Wizard magazine that included, or a Hero magazine that included a comic book along with it, it's a good bet someone's going to sell the comic book separately. But then you also have to answer the question of, how do you treat the magazine with and without the comic book? Is it, do we treat it as a defective item? Do we treat the two together as a collected set, and that there's another variation just created by default, which is the two having been separated. Where does it all start and stop? What's the dividing line? Anyway, yeah, there's a discussion board on the forums, and please let us know what you're thinking on that, because we're basically kind of converging on a consensus of this on the editorial, but it's far from fixed. So please let us know what you think, because yeah, we really want your input. And let's see here, and also Mod wants to remind everyone you can also request your own live stream topics. All right, let's see here. Andre says, when updating from the picture Blu-ray disc, should I or should I not suggest replace matching files? It's an interesting question. So let me show him what he's talking about first. So if you got a new version of ComicBase and you want to install it off the discs, you could come up under here. Let me go ahead and zoom in so you can see what I'm doing. Go under File and go Install Pictures and Movies. It's going to bring you to the Install Pictures and Movies dialog, which is down here. I'm going to have to point to some pictures. Well, here, let me get to a different way. Okay, so you're going to choose the pictures you want to install, and then you'll be left with this dialog where it says, okay, where you want to install them to, and then you'll leave these ones alone typically, but then you're going to say whether or not to replace matching files. This is by default not going to be checked. So what it's really doing at this point is it's unrolling a ginormous, or sometimes several ginormous zip or 7-zip archives. This is something that is done very, very bulk fashion. It's ridiculously fast for what it's doing. In other words, you can install a whole Blu-ray disc if you've got a Blu-ray disc image. If you've got a speedy enough machine, you can do it in about 20 minutes. Right? Whereas if you tried to do this kind of copy file by file, especially if you're going to look and say, is one bigger or smaller than the other one, it literally would take. We used to do it this way, and it literally took several hours, like 8 or 9 hours. But one of the things that the speed comes with, unfortunately, is it's an all or nothing. So you're either going to always replace, everything if it's got the file existing by another name, or you're not. What I would say is, if you're not sure, this way, if you have unique content of your own that you've been scanning in and you haven't been submitting it to us, if you have been submitting it to us, then you're just going to get the same picture right back again. So go ahead and let it rip. But if you have unique content, so if you've been scanning in your own books, you want to keep those particular images safe, I would say do not hit replace matching files. On the other hand, if you haven't been scanning your own books, go ahead and hit replace matching, because there's always in one of these updates going to be hundreds, if not thousands, sometimes tens of thousands of improved pictures, improved scans, larger scans than we had before. And the Blu-ray disc is always going to have the best copy that we've got. Now, that said, imagine an asterisk at the end of that last statement, because if you've been downloading them all along, that's even better. Because the Blu-ray disc, as big as they are, they're 6 gigabytes of usable space on each one of these double layer Blu-ray discs, and so you've got almost 100 gigs of Blu-ray goodness on the two disc images. They still have to be compressed more than the same images when we serve them up as a download, because we have to fit the disc. We can't, we're not going to ship you them on 4 discs. It's not going to happen. It would be ridiculous. But if you're downloading, we can ship them to you at a better compression level. So you actually get a higher quality copy of all the images if you're downloading them as a download as you go. That's probably the best overall way to handle this one. Now, what I do personally, let me go ahead and put myself back on camera. What I do personally on my own machines, I used to slavishly install all the Blu-ray disc images onto whatever machine I was using, and that would be my walking around and show off ComicBase thing, or use it for my own uses. What I do these days, though, is I whenever I have a new machine I want to install ComicBase on, is I put the quick start pictures on, which is that single 6 gigabyte archive, but they're just the little teeny images. It's all the ones you'd see in a grid. And then as I use the program, every time I click on one, the program preferences automatically download the large sized highest quality version of any picture that I'm actually looking at. And that's what I really do for myself, because that gives me the best of all the different worlds, where anything that I've ever looked at, I'm looking at the best copy of that picture that I can get. And everything else is just a placeholder that I'm just saying, oh, okay, yeah, that one in the grid, I see that variant, whatever else. That one, I don't need to take up a ton of space on my disk to show all that stuff. And I don't need to go through the whole install process. So in reality, I don't actually install pictures at all myself anymore, unless I have to do something very extraordinary. Like, for instance, I know you do the cover catalog for PDF, in which case, for those purposes, I'd say go ahead and install everything, because you want to generate the best quality version of that one that you can. But realistically, before I do that, you might want to check and see, because you have to print them kind of smallish. Check and see if the other images are discernibly different, just the quick start images, because it may be, if you're printing the thing this big, for your thumbnails, just so it doesn't take a trillion pages to make the file for, that might be the way to go. But yeah, run a quality test on that one before you do the install, would probably be my best advice for that particular application. All right, good question. All right, let's see what else we got going on here. Move my camera back. All right. Okay, Rob says, after syncing the cloud with Sidekick and do a search with mobile app, all comics in stock show on the mobile app as near mint minus. I could change the grays, but why it doesn't show my grays? That's actually something we fixed just recently. If you're still seeing that in your listing, do pull your inventory down on your profile. Just go on ComicBase.com, go under My Account, and then Profile. Remove your database, but then repost. And when you see the reposted ones, you'll all see with the proper grades attached to them. That was one of these weird things where we fixed something on the back end to make it so that it didn't it better dealt with people's damaged databases and weird things like that, and it inadvertently wound up essentially showing the wrong display grade in the mobile app if you were just browsing the listings. But that should all be working. We're fine now. All right, Hoarders Hide says, is there a way for the ComicBase app to show the value of a book in a particular grade as opposed to the near mint value only? It doesn't do it right now. It's basically just doing a multiply of the book times the near mint grade percentage, which is the one that's seen under grading percentages. It's something to think about. You have to be really careful with mobile apps to not overwhelm them functionality wise. I mean, it's better with a mobile app to do a few things really well than try to do a lot of things badly. And so I guess I'd want to look at the problem, but I'd want to look at it with what am I really trying to do here? Because I mean, if you could do it simply, then that'd be a pretty good thing to do. If you could do it very clean, but I don't want to clutter up the program too much, because, like I say, even just with that example of like showing a phone in this direction and showing it this way, we literally have to take things away to make it so it looks clean in this dimension. And so all these little things that would be no problem at all to do on a desktop application, you'd be like, oh yeah, sure, just give drop down menu for that, no problem. You'd be amazed how much that can add to just the overall craft of a mobile app. So let me think on it, but let me take a good look at it before I commit one way or another. Steve says, when installing the covers, is it possible to have an option to not install preliminary covers? Probably makes the process slow, but it doesn't hurt to ask. So just to provide some context for everybody else, what we're talking about on this one. So in ComicBase, the way covers get to us, eventually, when the comic eventually ships and we actually see it in hand, eventually, we will, have one of our editors go and actually scan a comic book in, and that's great. But months before that happens, typically we have gotten first a preliminary version of that cover through the solicitations that Diamond Comics or the other distributors give us right when they're first soliciting the cover. And those will typically, because we know they're coming from those sources, we know that they're not the final art yet, we will tag them as saying preliminary art along the side, and they'll all be a particular size. There's a couple different places, sizes they can be depending on where they came from. One's like exactly 450 pixels wide. The other one I think is exactly 705 pixels tall or some crazy thing like that. And so what we do is we offer an option in ComicBase later on, because some people like saying, well, this is as placeholder, I'd rather have that than a blank square. Other people are like, hey man, I don't want anything in the program that in my database that isn't exactly the real cover. So we offer an option in ComicBase when you're downloading updates to say whether or not you want to allow there to be preliminary art shown to you. And so you can actually, and this is, so there's a, let's see here. So when you download updates, you have a choice to say whether or not you want to download preliminary art. But then another thing you can do, there's a new choice in the program itself of never download preliminary art. So if you check this one over here, even if I've got a cover up on our server and the only cover we have is a prelim cover, and I say download covers, if you've got that checked, that prelim cover will never come down even if you ask for it. The other place that prelims get controlled is when I go and I just update this one here, but let me go ahead and I'm going to hold down the shift key when I say check for updates. And I'm going to essentially get asked whether I want to re-download an update I've already downloaded. And now when I do this, I've got the option over here when I download pictures, and this is only for the archive edition users, I can say don't download concept or preliminary art. And if so, we actually keep a list back on our servers of all the pictures we've got that are the magic dimensions, which indicate that they are prelim or concept art, and we serve you up a completely different list of pictures based on whether you've got this item checked or not checked. So that's the story of how we know about preliminary arts. But Steve then asks a pretty interesting question, which is, all right, well, we're going to be refreshing all of our picture discs. Is there a way to get picture discs which don't include preliminary art? And remember, just because it's doing a big decompress, using about 8, basically it's using as many of your processor threads as it can, and we don't get to make picture by picture choices on this one. If we wanted to give you the option of not downloading, not installing preliminary art at that point, if you're installing off the disks, we'd have to either say the stuff that hits the disks is either all not preliminary, or what our default is right now is that we include the preliminary art along with that, because I'd rather show you a picture in progress than no picture at all, if that's all we have. So what's on the actual picture discs does include preliminary arts. There's not really a great way to have, it already takes weeks to prep the picture archives. We're not going to do it in another format that, and here's the picture discs loaded with prelim or not prelim art. That's not going to be a thing. That makes the whole thing far too confusing. We'd have to ship different product SKUs and you name it. It would bad. But one thing you could do if you wanted to is after you download pictures, if you do want to download everything as you go, you could certainly do a rebuild of all your picture lists, and that's you do that under File. Let me go ahead and show it. Come up here under File Tools, go to Rebuild Lists, have it rebuild all your picture list information after you do the install, so it gets all the current dimensions of every picture you've got. That's which is why that takes a while, because opening up 875,000 pictures, measuring the dimensions, and writing up and updating the database reference to those ones to have exactly the picture you just installed. Yeah, it takes a while. Let that one run overnight typically. But once you've done that, you're actually in a position then to do a find for those picture size columns I mentioned that you can find under the setup menu when you go to columns to view. Well, some of the columns, again, they're not checked by default. I have them checked on this one here because I was doing some testing. But you can do have it show your picture height, your picture width, the size of the file when it was modified. You can do a find for all the pictures that are exactly 450 pixels wide, or the pictures that are exactly 705 pixels wide, and that will let you pull up all the pictures that are in those things. At which point, well, actually, I wouldn't even do this in ComicBase. Now I'm thinking about it, because that would give you the list, and you could go one by one and pull them out that way. But that's not actually how you want to get to them. What you'd want to do is you'd want to go in Windows Explorer, and you'd want to do a find and do it for image sizes. They're exactly 450 pixels wide or 705 pixels tall. And if you just found all those in your ComicBase picture folder, that would be all the preliminary pictures you've got. just highlight them, hit delete, and that would take them out after the fact. Probably the best we could do on short, in the near term on that one. All right. And Hoarders High says, how about a jump to in the app? Really no quick way to check if I have a issue 1349 of 4-color comics. Good point. There is actually a way to do it. It's not discussed much. It's one of the features hidden completely in plain sight. But if you actually type Dell 4-color comics 1349, it'll take you straight to that issue. So you just keep on typing as it's auto completing. Go past the issue, the title itself, and then type space and then the issue number. It'll go straight to that issue. Be cool if there was a way to make that a little more evident, because some people know and a lot of people don't, and I can't really blame you for not knowing if you didn't. All right. I think that will do me for that part. One thing I just want to get into, because it's just boy, and now, I was gonna get into it, and now I realize I don't have the camera set up to show this, but yeah, I'm gonna talk about it a bit. Maybe if I get a chance, maybe I'll post some pictures linked in the stream. But so I was looking at, I was looking at, and let me take this off the screen so I'm not obscured the entire time. This is Men Magazine, issue number, oh, good Lord, 402, something like that. Anyway, this was put out by the same company that Marvel Comics was way back in the day, under their Atlas label. You can see in the little tiny corner over here, I think it's Martin Goodman, the old publisher of Marvel. And this one, aside from you might get from ComicBase that I like pulp art. So aside from just awesome pulp art covers and things like that, you've got the guy fighting off the ravaging vampire bats. But I came across this one recently for a couple bucks in a store, and of course, I couldn't say no to it. But I thought, well, I've never actually taken the time to read any of these old pulp guy mags from the 40s and 50s. Let's break it open. I'm not expecting the fiction to be amazing or anything, but let's see what we got. And it was absolutely striking to me, comparing this to a modern comic book, or even for that matter to an issue of GQ or anything like that, how much more serious. I mean, you sit there and say, we're talking about rampaging vampire bats, and there's a story here about sharks eating people's legs off and stuff like that. But it was such a more serious world, than for the people who were coming off the GI Bill and coming off of World War II than they are today. And one of the things I love about it, and which I miss terribly in reprints of things, is they don't have the ads. So, for instance, take whatever issue you have laying around of whatever comic book you've got, flip it out to the back, or even if you've got like a respectable guy magazine, flip it over to the back. It's going to be an ad for something like a car or cigarettes or whatever else. But here's the ad here's the ad on the back of Men Magazine. It's anyone can learn how to fix cars in a jiffy. Which, by the way, also, if you look at the size of the type involved with old ads like this, they expected you to read. It wasn't going to be just a picture of a pretty girl and 6 words to try to convince you that their brand was the better brand of all the whatever things were. No, they're trying to lay out a case why you should be investing in their set of essentially the Forerunner Chilton manuals, so you can learn the art of auto repair and do something with your life. That's the back cover. Cover number 1. Now give yourself $168 a month raise selling shoes. Next to that, this free sample lesson will prove that you too can become an expert bookkeeper, accountant, CPA. Free sample lesson. Sending away for different correspondence courses. I will train you for good paid jobs in radio television repair. And yeah, a lot of the stuff was, a vocational training by mail. A lot of it was scam based. I'll send you a box of parts, and if you can build a radio out of it, it's like, well, then I guess you learned something, didn't you? But they were really expecting these guys to learn a trade, and the way you were going to get the woman and impress your all the other cool people and everything. It wasn't about buying some fancy clothes. It wasn't about having a really good looking car. It was about being a really serious guy who actually did something with your life. But I mean, you can flip all the way through it. I mean, you've got Charles Atlas bodybuilding in here, you know, Men versus Medicine, How I Foxed the Navy by Arthur Godfrey. This is actually an ad, but it's basically saying, yeah, I was in the Navy. I was crummy at math, and I got into trouble with my boss, and I almost got kicked out of my posting. But now I learned math, and thank you, international correspondence schools. I'm actually worth something. Um, no, no limit hospital plans. Yes, they're advertising healthcare plans in this thing. A lot of them were for the kind of mechanical injuries you'd get lifting heavy things around in the Navy or doing things like that. I mean, it was definitely a working man's world back in the day, which is why they also back in the day, I think in the 50s, I think the stat is American men ate an average of 400 calories more per day than they do today, and nobody was fat. We get to do things like this, and yeah, we're not exactly burning the calories. But yeah, we have our pulpy stories, blood mad bats of the lost world, and also it's, we test again tomorrow about being a test pilot guy. They ate through his leg. I think I had it wrong. Yes. There's the downed pilots. Where are the bodies? Yeah. So you've got your gore, you've got your horror, you've got your lurid crime. You have, and I'll show you the really racy stuff. Yes, there's a pinup. On one hand, they're going to talk about Britain's 50 lusty years, and it's a long article about the body ages of Britain. Who knew that those Shakespearean people, those uptight Brits were actually, so but yes, this gives us an excuse to hide the centerfold. And you'll notice, and this is again apparently someone named Lily St. Cyr, who I guess if I grew up in this, I served in World War II, I guess I'd know who that is. In here, she's wearing her clothes, but again, the whole thought of the subtext of all this men's stuff is, learn to do something useful with your life, or you are never going to get, to meet women like Lily St. Cyr. Anyway, I thought it was really interesting. If you ever get a chance to check out old men's magazines like that, I think the ads more than anything else tell you how much the world has changed, and it's fascinating. I really wish that the different reprints and archival material that we have available to us today did a better job of portraying what the culture was like through the ads and the things that they were trying to sell you. And that's actually one of the things people always say, well, like, why do we have magazines and ComicBase? And I'm like, well, because there's a sense of history you have by browsing, like you get your sense from the history books of, what was the world like prior to World War II? What was like during the Depression? We all have these little thumbnail sketches of what we thought it was like in our own heads. It's really, really different to go back to after, take the momentous event, 9/11, the election that it went your way or didn't go your way, the person who came to power didn't go to power, was, we remember it very, very monochromatically, I think. But on the other hand, if you're able to flip open that issue of Time or Newsweek or, the Wall Street Journal or whatever else from that day, it's completely different. In my as I'm working here in the office, off to my left is out of camera range. I've got an old TV. Well, it used to be over my treadmill, but I have it on just during the day just to listen to as I'm working. And I have different podcasts going on there. And one of the podcasts is just because I played something. I have a little playlist of things that are going on in the background. But they had because I'd run out of the current shows for this podcaster, it had flipped to whatever YouTube was going to recommend, from the same guy. And suddenly it's back in time a couple of years ago. And it was from the day after the election of 2 years ago. And it was like, yeah, it's Wednesday and we don't know who's president. And we probably won't know for a while. And I'm like, wow, that is so much more real than the kind of thumbnail sketch of how people think about the weeks after the last presidential election, where it just you kind of and that's a lot of it has to do with what side you're on, but you kind of gets reduced to this little thumbnail sketches. Oh yes, we all knew that blah, we all we all knew that these guys were crazy and those guys were that, or but no, when you actually flip on and actually hear the contemporaneous coverage, it's nothing like what you remember. It's like, oh yeah, that's right. for like a week. We really didn't know who president was meant to be. And then people just over time started kind of hardening and say, wait a minute, this doesn't add up for me. Or that does add up for me. Same thing goes, you could go for COVID, you could go for anything else. The contemporaneous accounts are so different than our memories. It's shocking. And then when you take it on a longer stretch like that, where you talk about like, well, yeah, what were men like in the 50s, and we've got an idea in our head, and other people have their ideas in their head. But man, when you see what they were trying to sell to a guy, just a guy again out of the out of the army, out of the Navy, who's just trying to make it in the world, and you saw what like the advertisers were going for, you get such a better sense of his world than those little thumbnail sketches in your head. It's like, it's worth checking out. Anyway, those are my thoughts. Thank you for hanging out with me. And guys, we will chat with you later. I hope you all had a great Halloween. I hope by the time we're done seeing each other next week that we actually do know whether our guy won or our guy lost for whatever we're cheering for. I wish you all the best and take care, and I'll see you next time. Bye-bye.